Ed with Bloomfield Cemetery. Today I wanted to make a video talking about block number 12 in Bloomfield. Block 12 has College Street and takes a left heading south on Church Street. There's 3 properties on there, and actually 4 properties. In the beginning, the house, the 2-story house, 11547 College, was owned by Azel Patterson, who also owned the tavern, that hotel that would later be sold to Oliver Lefebvre. So Patterson has a plot at the cemetery with many children in it. Different times Fever swept through here, and Bodega, where he laid Bodega Corners, where he lived later on. And after Azel Patterson lived in that home, then Elizabeth Pettit, who came to Bloomfield in 1857. She lived in Illinois, and her husband passed away. She had 4 children, and her brother was Hugh Stockdale. Hugh and his brother were already established in Bloomfield. So Hugh went back to get his sister and her 4 children. One of those was Amos Pettit. So Amos Pettit would be the next occupant of 11547 College Street. He raised a family there, and Amos Pettit would pass away in 1909. He was staying at his daughter's home in Sebastopol at the time of his passing. His son George was so distraught over his passing that George himself became seriously ill and under doctor's care as a result of the anxiety and heartbreak over his father's passing. His father's passing was pretty sudden. He was ill for a couple of days, but his passing was unexpected. So George stayed. He actually no longer lived at the home in Bloomfield. He stayed with his sister in Sebastopol for a couple of years until he was ready to come back to Bloomfield. In the meantime, they rented the home out to Al Simonette, who I talked about before, who was a barber, and he had married Dr. Cockrell's daughter. So they rented 11547 College for a couple of years before George and his mother moved back to live there. George had a few brothers and sister, and one of them was Lewis Wales Pettit. So back in the day when Amos Pettit was first moved into the College Street home, he had married Margaret Hall, daughter of Henry Hall. So they were living there, which happened to be right across the street from Lewis Wales Miller, the stagecoach driver and livery stable owner. Obviously good friends. Amos was a harness maker at the time, harness maker and farmer. And when Lewis Miller passed away, Amos Pettit named his next born son Lewis Wales Pettit. So obviously good friends. So George would live in the home until his passing in 1950s, and the house actually remained vacant for a while. At the time, George had no descendants. He was the last of the Pettits from that family. He did, however, have a niece and a nephew, and that would be Malcolm Pierce. So many of you remember Malcolm Pierce from Pierce's Corner down at the corner. And so Malcolm was George's nephew, and Malcolm would handle the estate, George's estate, and he ended up selling the 2-story home to Mary Brown. Mary Brown owned it for a couple years, and then she would sell that home to John Shetka. John Shetka and his sister would own the home. That was my cat jumping on my tripod stand. Heaven's sake. Um, they would purchase the home and take care of their father, John Shetka. I don't know if he was a senior or not, but they had lived in Bloomfield 40 years prior. In fact, that's where Mrs. Miller, Leona Miller, was born, in Bloomfield, up on the hill, the David Parks home. So in '61 they purchased the 11547 College, and their father was living there, and I remember often, being over at Dale's, and his grandfather, who seemed extremely tall to us when we were growing up. He was still living there. So anyway, Mary Brown was my great grandmother. When she sold the home to Dale's mom and uncle, my grandmother at that time was relocating to a house right around the corner on Church Street, a small stucco home that Ray Murga had moved 3 homes from Santa Rosa into Bloomfield. One that Ray Murga was living on, another one going north up Church Street that is currently owned by Latiers, and one south that was next to the Murphy home. Now, the Murphy home was originally a home, it was an empty lot that the Mitchells owned. I believe they probably had a barn on it at one time. Now, whether the Mitchells built the barn um, or the previous family built the barn, in the panoramic photo, it appears to be kind of a large structure on the corner. But anyway, for many years afterwards, there was only small small buildings on there, probably for poultry purposes. And when my great grandmother purchased that plot of land, she built a home there on the corner of Church and Pearl. When Ray Murga moved these homes from Santa Rosa into Bloomfield, and the one small stucco just south on Church Street is still there. And so there was 2 homes that looked similar in size to that, and then the one that Ray Murga lived on the corner of Sutton and Church, was larger. And so in '61, after the home was purchased by the Shetkas, Mary Brown purchased that small home on Church Street in addition to the lot that was on the corner. So she occupied that small home for a while, and then she rented it out, put it up for sale later on in the '60s, and then it eventually sold. And so anyway, um, College Street, I still don't know why College Street has that name. It's intriguing because whether it was the intention that Bloomfield was someday going to strive for greatness and eventually have, a college or a building worthy of a college. And another tidbit, most of the Pettits are at the cemetery. Elizabeth Pettit passed away in 1864. She's there. Her son, Horelos, now he has a first name that I've never seen before, and is difficult to pronounce. But I believe it's Horelos Pettit. He passed away like at the age of 35 in 1875. And according to Rebecca Woodson, he was Horelos was originally placed at the cemetery at the halfway point between Bloomfield and Valley Ford, the same one that Rebecca Woodson's father was at. Horelos, his headstone is at Bloomfield Cemetery, and I believe he was later moved and placed next to his mother. So Horelos, Elizabeth, and then Amos Pettit has his family plot there with his wife and children. And Amos had a large square headstone that for the longest time was face down, about 400 pounds square. So when something is square, obviously it's just dead weight. There's no way to utilize leverage in raising something like that. So we had Dale and I had some people come out and help us. One of them was Jimmy Passantino, which a lot of you may know from when the Passantinos lived up the hill by the quarry on Bloomfield Road, up past Posey's. And the quarry is still there. I don't think it's used as a quarry anymore, but anyway, it's right there. So Jimmy Passantino, who worked with Dale at Precision Crane, he came out and he's helped us a couple times with equipment needs and just help, and it's nice to visit, kind of catch up, and that the fact that he's back helping in Bloomfield is pretty cool. But anyway, Amos Pettit, he had that large stone, probably about 400 pounds, just dead weight. So we had to essentially just use hands, hands and lifting that thing up. I got a picture of it both laying face down. I got a picture of it when we first got it stood up on the base, got the base level. We had to clean it up a fair amount, re-glue it, and then a picture of it when it's clean. But so for the longest time, like people who do online searches for headstones, find a grave. They would come out to, there was 2 headstones that were face down, and Amos Pettit was one of them with information on it. And until we could get it raised, we didn't know exactly who was going to be on that headstone. So anyway, and let's see, Margaret Pettit would end up owning the 2-story home and also the lot that Ray Murga put that stucco home on. Yeah, she and later George obviously would inherit those 2 properties, and then later it would be sold to my great grandmother, and my parents purchased the corner lot, and they eventually remodeled the home that my great grandmother had built there. My parents remodeled it in the late 60s, pretty much to the way it looks today, exterior wise. And I know the Murphys, who owned it after my parents. My parents sold it to the Murphys in 75, 76, somewhere that area. They remodeled the interior, which I had seen a couple times, and they did a really nice job. But on the property, the 3rd property at the corner of Broderick and Church was owned by Mary Welch, I believe. Is it Mary Welch or Mary Walsh? Mary Welch. And I don't have much history on that. Mary's relatives have been in contact. Unfortunately, they don't have any photos. They have limited information because in transition, that information was either lost, misplaced, or it just doesn't exist. But always hopeful and optimistic that stuff shows up. Mary Welch owned that particular lot. A man by the name of James Henry owned it, and his name shows up on the 1867 map. He is at Bloomfield Cemetery next to his grandson. Those 2 passed within 2 weeks of each other. And just south of James Henry's place was Tom Kelly, who owned the Hub Saloon. His Hub Saloon and was a Hub Saloon and stable was just south of Broderick. So Broderick today curves into Church Street, as where before Broderick went straight through all the way to Main Street and actually up to the school. So the Hub Saloon was on Broderick at the corner of Broderick and Washington, but on the south side, as you can see in the photo. So, and Tom Kelly would be the fella who, the saloon owner, who would later be brought up on, I don't know if it was attempted murder or attempted manslaughter charges for shooting a man who he said was trying to hold him up, or at least assaulted him, and he ended up shooting this fella, and he was brought up on charges. An oddity is, and something that I've been looking into for some time, is that Dr. Bruce Cockrell, in February of 1888, excuse me, Dr. Cockrell was assessed a road and school tax on his property. Now, the nice thing about when they do this and they would publish information in the newspaper, they would give great detail about where lots were located. And they stated that Dr. Cockrell's lot, Bruce Travis Cockrell, his lot was south of the Mitchells and north of Mary Welch, bounded on the west by Church Street and bounded on the east by Washington, which is now Cockrell. That puts him right on the lot where the stucco home is now on Church Street, the small stucco home next door to where Murphy's lived, to where my parents lived. Bruce and his wife had 10 children. They had a huge family. So, and this tax assessment was for improvements and for home furnishing. So they're living in a home located on that lot. I have never found a photo of a large home that would accommodate, 10 to 12 people. So on on this panoramic shot in front of the church, I hope this can show up. This is the Methodist church. I'll lean it, hopefully, so it cuts down on the glare. This is Mitchell's home, okay, which would later be Pellegard's home. And then there's a large 2-story building, which would be placed right where the Cockrell location would be. That's a big house. I've never seen that home on any other photos or talked about, like if it burned down or if it was rebuilt or raised or anything. So it's still a mystery. And if it weren't for this article talking about the tax assessment and breaking down that there's improvements and that there are home furnishings that the assessment is made on, and the lot is owned by Dr. Cockrell. If it weren't for that, then I would still be wondering where Dr. Cockrell and his large family lived in town. So they were their home was either facing Church Street or facing Washington Street, south to Washington Street. Now, on the 1867 map, there is a small building located next to where Patterson Pettit home, but this building appears to be either in the middle of the lot or to the western side of the lot, much like the building that's located there today. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery, and someday, I hope to have obviously a photo. It must have been a grand home, 2-story, obviously 2-story, enough to accommodate up to a dozen people. So a bit of a mystery, and hopefully someday, it'll be not necessarily solved, but love to see a picture of that home. Must have been magnificent. I continue sending out letters anytime I get a name and number or inkling throughout the history research that I do. I'm good about sending out letters, asking people for more information so I can get it on the website. And the more we know about who these folks were, what they look like, what they did, just who they were, um, solving the puzzle one small piece at a time. And, um, hopefully we'll fill in the mosaic to the best of our ability, and people find it entertaining. So, anyway, hope you're having a fine day, and I'll be chatting with you soon. All right.